Liebe Zuschauerinnen, liebe Zuschauer,
Dear viewers, dear listeners, greetings in God and welcome to today's program in the series, The True School is Life.
dieses Mal lautet das Thema
This time the topic
Lernen
is
fokussieren.
We Learn to Focus.
Was bedeutet
What does
fokussieren?
focusing mean?
Allgemein versteht
In
man
general,
darunter
it means
Wahrnehmung auf
directing
einen
one's
bestimmten
perception to a certain point,
die Bündelung
bringing
von
thought energies together onto a certain goal, ultimately concentration.
Ob wir Maschinen
Whether we are operating machines and devices or driving a car,
oder Gespräche
whether we are sitting at a desk or having conversations with friends and conversation partners in which the focus is on constructive solutions,
zubereiten,
whether we are doing housework or preparing a meal, concentration makes many things easier and more effective, be it in the areas of our occupational or private everyday life.
in dem Text von Gabriele, aus dem wir
In
heute
Gabrieles text, from which we may read today, focusing is to be understood as an aid on the path that leads to spiritual evolution,
mein Gott,
nearer, my God, to Thee.
es ist der Weg, den Jesus
It is
von
the
Nazareth
path
lehrte,
that Jesus of Nazareth taught, and that the resurrected one, the Christ of God, teaches again today. For nearly 50 years, He, the free Spirit, has been speaking to us again, worldwide, to all people, to all tribes, to all peoples and nations.
die Prophetin
He
und
does this
Botschafterin
through
Gottes.
Gabriele, the prophetess and emissary of God in our time.
Wir lernen fokussieren.
On the topic, we learn to focus, we may read to you, dear viewers, dear listeners, from a teaching hour of the divine wisdom. Gabriele explained,
Gabriele erklärte. Der Mensch hat sich von Gott, dem
Humankind has turned away from God, the life,
weniger.
the one more, the other less.
Bild zum
For
Besseren.
better understanding, here is a picture.
Wenn sich ein Erdteil von
When
der
a
Sonne
continent
abwendet,
turns away from the
wird es
sun,
auf diesem Teil
it
der
gets
Erde
dark
brütend
and cool, or even cold, early on that continent.
Ähnlich ist es mit uns
It is
Menschen.
similar with us people.
Nachdem, wie weit sich
Depending
der
on
Mensch
how
vom
far a
inneren
person has turned away from the inner light, the life,
Licht, indem er
by
gegen das
thinking
Leben
and
denkt und
acting
handelt,
against life,
entsprechend
he
fehlt es ihm
accordingly
an
lacks light
Wärme.
and warmth.
Das heißt,
This
dass er
means
dann auch keine
that he
Achtung mehr vor
then
dem
has
Leben
no
hat,
longer
das
any
in ihm
respect
ist,
for the life that
das
is
auch
in
in den
him,
Mineralien,
that is also in the minerals,
und in allen
nature
materiellen
kingdoms,
Gestirnen ist,
and in all material heavenly bodies,
Menschen sehen.
and in everything that we human beings see and do not see.
Gott ist das Leben.
God is the
Das
life.
Leben ist gut.
The life is good.
Es macht die
It
Fasern
makes
des
the
Mantels
fibers of the mantle, the human being, light-filled and powerful, happy and spiritually intuitive.
Es macht ihn
It
kommunikativ
makes
für
him
das Leben,
communicative for life.
wenn sich der
If the
Mensch
person
veredelt,
refines himself
indem er
by
dem
giving a
Leben
chance to
und
life
seinem
and
wahren
thus
Wesen
to his
eine
true
Chance
nature,
gibt.
by monitoring and controlling himself and clearing up everything that separates him from life.
Wir Menschen sind einzig auf
We
der
human
Erde,
beings are on earth solely in order to turn back to God, the inner light.
Vielleicht ist dies ein Satz für
Perhaps
uns zum
this is a sentence for us to reflect on, thus Gabriele.
Menschen sind einzig auf
We
der
human
Erde,
beings are on
uns
earth
wieder Gott,
solely
der
in order to turn back to God, the inner light.
Hier hilft uns wieder der Vergleich
Here
mit
again,
der Sonne.
the comparison with the sun and a continent helps us.
Wenn sich ein Erdteil
When a
der
continent
Sonne
turns
zuwendet,
toward the sun,
dann wird
it
es
becomes
lichter,
lighter,
heller.
brighter.
Die
The
Tage
days
werden
grow
länger,
longer,
es wird
it
wärmer.
gets warmer.
Alles fängt an zu
Everything
grünen
begins
und
to
zu
turn
blühen.
green and
Das
blossom.
Leben bricht auf.
Life bursts forth. It flourishes and shows itself in the most beautiful and luxuriant forms.
Dann kann gesagt
Then it can be said,
Geist
the
durchströmt
spirit
Materie.
permeates matter.
Gabriele erklärte weiter.
Gabriele explained
Haben
further,
wir den kurzen Darlegungen
if
über
we've
uns
listened
selbst
attentively to the
aufmerksam
brief
zugehört,
explanations
so wurde
about
uns
ourselves,
bewusst, dass
we
es
have become
zwei
aware that
Ströme
there are
gibt,
two
in die
currents
sich der Mensch
into
durch
which the
Senden
human
und
being can
Empfangen
connect by
einklinken
sending
kann.
and receiving.
Zum einen
On the
in
one
das
hand,
Gute,
into the
das das
good,
Leben
which
ist,
is the life,
das
which is for the human being and brings him good, and on the other hand, into the negative. I would also like to call it the bad, which is against life and which is directed against the person, against the mantle human being. Let us once again become aware that there are the for and against, and thus there is the negative focusing and the lawful focusing. To focus is to intensely send in order to receive correspondingly. Negative focusing starts from the so-called law of isolation, which first activates images in one's own repository, in the brain, which the brain, and thus the person, then projects outward, that is, sends. Via this his world of imagination, his pictures, which come from the ego, from the law of isolation, he receives like and similar things. By way of the negative principle of intense sending, that is, focusing, a person can also tap into the atmospheric chronicle. With this, in the atmospheric chronicle, he sets in motion what is useful to him for his purposes, which he may want to build up and expand. Think of science and economy, state and church. What people have thought or done in the past in a negative way flows to him. What he receives in response to his sending corresponds to his all-too-human sending potential. It is often unethical, immoral, brutal, spiteful. It is totally related to the law of isolation. Such human behaviors are not permeated by the Spirit.
Gabriele fuhr fort.
Gabriele continued. In our present time, we experience this negative, intense sending or focusing in manifold ways. Generally speaking, these are astral influences. Through this influence, objects can also be moved, and people who are receptive for this can be controlled, because they have similar things in themselves. We can see which energy spheres we can get in touch with under certain circumstances if we do not handle our energies responsibly, if the direction of our inner goal and view, our orientation and attitude are not God and the divine. Before we get into the actual topic of learning to focus in more detail, it was necessary to explain these two possibilities, negative focusing and lawful focusing. We do not want to get into the communication level of negative focusing. Here we learn to focus as a help on the path that leads to spiritual evolution, nearer, my God, to you, so that God can work through us more and more. And with this, His will is done and His kingdom comes, the kingdom of peace. The prerequisite for positive focusing on the spiritual divine level is that the following statement is essentially our heart's aspiration: to develop divine energies, to turn toward the life that is God, by purifying our soul and our person, the mantle, from what is against life. Everyone can ask himself, perhaps in a quiet hour of self-reflection, whether he wants this from the heart, whether he wants to illuminate his shell, so that God can permeate matter and the person attain communication with the All-Being.
Gabriele führte weiter aus.
Gabriele explained
Das
further.
Leben ist Licht.
Life is light. It is power, all communication.
Wird unsere Seele Licht,
If our soul becomes more filled with light, then also the person becomes purer and his mantle of isolation finer. This means that the light begins very gradually to permeate him. That is, the spirit begins to permeate the material. We receive increased positive energy to the same extent that we turn to the life, to God and us. Through this, we can concentrate better. From this develops an increasing intuition for life. We gradually notice that life is not only in us, but also around us. Life is communication. All being communicates with one another. It is the language of the degree of consciousness. One state of consciousness understands the other, because all pure forms are in one law, in the divine law, the life. We human beings are in the middle of an incomprehensible sea of communicative processes of positive and negative energies. Our brain can be compared with a radar screen. With our feeling, sensing, thinking, and speaking and acting, we adjust the radar screen to corresponding transmitting stations so as to receive energies from there. We receive them first in our brain, and then in and on our body, which can be compared to a television screen. What we receive, we radiate pictorially. Thus, everyone will one day ask himself, toward what is the pointer on the scales tending? Toward which transmission sources is the radar screen, his brain, directed? To the positive or to the negative? The direction toward which our radar screen, the brain, turns is determined exclusively by each person himself.
Let us listen to what Gabriele explained further about this. She said, when we become aware that in everything we see, we do not want to speak of what we do not see, there is life, that is, highest communication, then we can also consciously enter into communication with the life, which is the good. The prerequisite, as stated, is that we approach the life within us, just as a continent inclines toward the sun. To focus means to bring together the spiritually developed positive energies into a ray of energy or a guiding ray, which we then direct at an object, at a situation, at our work and the like. Let us realize again and again anew that everything is energy, and that each volume of energy has its state of consciousness, that is, it radiates correspondingly and transmits information to us. Many people speak of coincidences and impulses. Since everything is energy, there are no coincidences. If our mantle, that is, our body, has become more light-filled because our soul has become purer, then the Spirit can send more rays of divine energies through us, so that we think and live more consciously. The brighter our soul and our body become, the more clearly the person can enter into communication with corresponding potentials of consciousness through the principle of sending and receiving, through focusing. An important prerequisite for learning to focus is to, first of all, free ourselves from concepts and opinions, from intentions and stipulations such as, this should go this way or that way, or this should meet my desires and my ideas, or I want to explore ideas that serve me personally.
Gabriele now explains to us what chance focusing offers. She said, if we have oriented our inner and outer life toward God, and if we daily strive to maintain this for the most part, then we will also strive to grasp our world of thoughts and feelings, our wanting. We practice self-recognition and clear out our all-too-human aspects more and more, in order to be able to understand our neighbor better, among other things, and step by step enter into the life, into the law of God, which is our true being. To intensify these processes, in order to recognize ourselves more quickly and more easily, and overcome what is not good, in order to grasp our causes and their often manifold roots, and remove them from the field of our soul, the collecting, the concentration of the forces of our consciousness is required. To this end, we learn to focus. Focusing thus offers us the chance to work on ourselves, on our inner path, more effectively. All our burdens, which constitute our all-too-human potential for guilt and sin, are energetically recorded in us like on a film reel that runs through our conscious mind and subconscious. The film reel in our head consists of sequences of pictures. They say many things about us. What they say are our inputs. If we learn to focus positively in order to delete our inputs on the film reel, then we can lighten them, so that on our path through life, many things lighten up and we can forestall many a fate. If we clear up in the day whatever comes up, then we cleanse our future, so to speak. Gabriele repeats a sentence that says so much. If we clear up in the day what comes up, then we clear up our future, so to speak. Our soul can then go to more light-filled spheres after discarding the shell of its body.
Gabriele führt weiter aus.
Gabriele continued.
Fokussieren heißt nichts anderes.
Focusing means nothing more than complete and prolonged concentration, which we direct to problems, objects, work processes, and the like.
Wir tun dies,
We do this to break them down in order to grasp the message that lies in them. To be able to concentrate for a longer period of time, the first thing we need to do is to free ourselves from time pressure, anger, daily worries, personal wanting, stress, and attachment to our fellow people. Above all, what we need is inner peace. For example, by observing ourselves, in order to let go of all too human singularities through meditative exercises to become still, in order to achieve the harmonization of our brain activity. Therefore, we need inner and outer calmness in order to let corresponding pictures develop in our brain, which we then concentrate into energies and precisely direct at an object, at a situation. I repeat, thus Gabriele, focusing has to be learned. We have to again and again practice concentrating and directing our combined energies at what we want to break down. Focus is the hotspot.
ist Brennpunkt. Fokussieren
To
heißt,
focus
Energien
means to bring
zusammenführen,
energies together and direct them as through a magnifying glass at a situation or an object.
In der Lehrstunde von
The teaching
Gabriele
hour
heißt
with
es weiter,
Gabriele continued.
der Mensch,
The human
besonders in
being,
dieser Zeit, ist
especially
meist
during
nach
this
außen
time,
gekehrt.
is mostly
Sein
turned to
Bewusstsein ist
without.
nicht gesammelt,
People's
sondern
consciousness
zerstreut.
is not collected,
Es zieht
but scattered.
bzw. treibt
It
einmal
draws or
hierhin,
drifts,
einmal
one
dorthin.
time here, one time there.
Wer Angst hat, in der Hetze
Those who are
menschlichen
afraid
Daseins
of
nicht mehr
no longer
mitzukommen,
being able to keep
wer sich
up
vom
with the hectic
Zeitgeist
pace of human
tyrannisieren
existence,
lässt,
who allow
um die
themselves to
entsprechende
be
Ehre zu
tyrannized by
erhalten.
the spirit of the
Oder
times
wer
in
zulässt,
order to
dass
receive the
andere über
corresponding
ihn
honor,
der ist der
or who
Schmied
allow
seines
others to
Unglücks.
determine them, are
Der
the
ist der
architects
Gejagte,
of their
der nicht mehr
misfortune.
weiß,
They
was
are the
vorne,
hunted
hinten,
ones, who no longer know what is in front,
und der
behind,
schließlich nicht
on the
mehr
right,
weiß,
and on the
wer er
left,
ist.
and who finally no longer know who they are.
Um mit dem, was uns
In
bewegt,
order to
richtig
deal
umgehen
properly with what
und mit
moves us,
unserer Energie
to be able to
haushalten,
economize with our
unsere
energy,
bewusst und
and to use
sinnvoll
it
einsetzen
consciously and
können,
sensibly,
müssten wir
we
mit
would have to
innerer
go through
und
our
äußerer
earthly life
Disziplin,
with
also
inner
mit einer
and outer
besonnenen,
discipline, that is, with a
aufrichtigen,
level-headed,
Haltung
upright,
durch unser
focused
Erdenleben gehen.
attitude.
Wer sich hingegen
On the other
in den
hand,
Bann von
those who allow
Ärger,
themselves to be
Kummer,
drawn under the
Angst
spell of
und
anger,
dergleichen ziehen
sorrow,
lässt,
fear,
kann
and the
nicht
like,
zielbewusst
cannot
arbeiten
work
und
purposefully,
nicht
and
das
cannot take with them the
Bewusstsein,
consciousness
das in
that
allem
is in
ist,
everything
als
as a
Helfer
helper in
mit
their
in
work,
seine Arbeit,
in the
in
course
seinen
of their
Lebensweg
lives.
nehmen.
Gabriele explained what we should watch out for. She said, as long as we let ourselves go, not paying attention to our feelings and sensations, thoughts and words, we become low on energy, tired and drained. Why? We cannot concentrate. We scatter energies instead of concentrating them. The first thing we need to do is train our brain to persevere in concentration. It is best to apply the first exercises to ourselves. Once we have learned to question and remedy, that is, to clear up what concerns us, what scatters us, or what pressures us personally, then we will succeed better and better at concentration. We must challenge ourselves, not only during these exercises, but day after day, hour after hour. Without the conscious concentration of our forces, that is, a mentally disciplined attitude, we will not progress and will fall back. If we demand accomplishment from ourselves, the brain cannot digress into idleness and the like. Accomplishment does not mean haste, but conscious activity. On the one hand, this makes our work more varied. We become more vital, more creative, more efficient, which brings us concentration and thus inner and also outer peace. In this way, we learn to be active in a balanced way.
Gabriele fasste zusammen.
Gabriele summarized.
Fokussieren heißt also, die
Thus,
Dinge
to
aufzusplitten.
focus means to break things down, to get help and impulse from the state of consciousness that we send to.
Das gilt nicht nur für die Arbeit an
This
sich selbst,
applies not only to the work on ourselves, but also in conversations.
Bereich.
This applies to our field of activity, also in answering letters and the like.
Konzentration werden wir auch
By
unsere
concentrating,
Arbeit
we will
zielbewusst
also
durchführen.
do our work
Das
purposefully.
bedeutet, dass wir
This
mehr
means that we will
und bessere
perform
Leistung
more
bringen.
and better.
Bewusstes Leben ist
Conscious
Leben im Geiste
living
Gottes.
is living in the Spirit of God.
Gesammelter
The
und
more
konzentrierter wir
consciously,
durch unsere
collectedly,
Lebenstage
and
schreiten,
concentratedly we go through our days on earth,
Geist des Lebens,
aligned with God, the
umso
Spirit
weiter wird
of
unser
life,
Bewusstseinshorizont.
the broader will be the horizon of our consciousness, the radiation of our consciousness.
Then
Then the work with our hands will be more and more filled with divine energy, and our actions will be a contribution to building up that energy potential from which the kingdom of God on earth grows. Thus, our life on earth can be profitable for many, our neighbor, our second neighbor, the animals, and for the Mother Earth.
Liebe Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer,
Dear viewers, dear listeners, at the end of the schooling, we again span the bow to the beginning, to the words from Gabriele. She said, "We human beings are on earth solely in order to turn back to God, the inner light." In this spirit, we take our leave of you and wish you and all of us all the best, concentrated and energy-filled days with the corresponding gain and life. We will be glad when you tune in again for the next program in this series, The True School is Life. Goodbye and greetings in God.